All right, we're here. I am Dr. Jim Porter, and this is Dr. Eric Diamond. Welcome to my Jim Porter PhD Counseling YouTube channel, and this is the second episode. I think I'm calling it Interviews with Psychotherapeutic Professionals, I believe is what I'm calling this. And I realize that whatever view I use will be used on the recording, so I'm going to switch it to the double view. And I'm not sure if you can see that, Eric, but anyway, this is Dr. Eric Diamond. This is Eric Diamond, PhD. I was going to say that he is a mentor. He's a professional. He's a psychotherapeutic professional in the Gainesville area, clinical or counseling psychologist.
Clinical psychology degree.
Okay, and I'm not sure what else I was going to say about you, but I consider him a mentor, a friend, and an all-around wise guy. So I'm really glad that you are willing to do this with me. And you know, I have some questions for you, but I will start right off the top, if you don't mind, unless you have something introductory to say.
Please jump in.
Okay, how did you get into this whole psychology thing, and where did you come to it from?
I was 15 years old. I was in the library of my high school in Hewlett, New York, and a book called to me from the shelf like had a magnetic charge. And I stood there reading the book for probably 20 minutes, half hour, completely mesmerized. And I consider it a calling, like a religious calling. And from that moment on, I never wavered in being a psychologist from age 15. It was the Primer of Freudian Psychology by Calvin Hall, which is kind of a dry, not that really interesting, gripping book per se, but it was like a calling. And prior to that, I had never even probably heard the word psychology, much less.
Wow.
Every man in my family on both sides is a businessman or a salesman. So it's in the nature of a calling.
There had to be an anomaly in there somewhere, and
oh yeah,
I'm glad there was. And since you brought up Freud, I was going to ask, in any way, what are your, I don't know, does psychodynamics and Freud and his lineage shape your work to this day? How so? What did it teach you about people? Or what have you learned about people on that path?
Well, I started with the love of psychodynamics, definitely, and I wanted to be like a detective of the mind. I think there's misconceptions in the public that Freud is the whole story, but really it's a giant branching tree from Freud's day down through object relation psychology, self-psychology, modern psychodynamic theory. It's really important to follow that thread. That being said, it's amazing what has held up. I think of Freud as kind of like Lewis and Clark, that someone who got to the territory first and mapped out what was there. And there's certain, in my view, fundamentals that are, they're just the fundamentals that Freud came onto: inner conflict, that there's a tug of war inside people between what we need or want, or the pleasures and the prohibitions, that there's some experiences we have of frustration and gratification as infants and children, and it's kind of a ratio thing, and that there's different lines of development. There's ego development, moral development, psychosexual development. I mean, this is all, to me, indisputable. And that there's self-protection or defenses, and in therapy it's called resistance, that we ask people to open up and spill the beans and speak freely, and there's parts that hide or hang back out of shame or fear or guilt. This is the territory that Freud staked out. And while some of his speculations that were clearly labeled as speculations, called metapsychology, have not necessarily held up over the 100 years, the fundamentals of people, the nature of anxiety, the nature of inner conflict has held up very well.
So in a sense, even though there might be like contradiction in the literature, it's exciting to see different ideas come out that seem to maybe not always jive with something, from other theories, and there may be competing
People
theories.
are so complex. People are so complex.
Yeah.
And human beings are so complex that you're never going to nail it down. But the controversy and the debate in itself is a good thing.
Yeah, it's a part of what we are, I guess.
Yeah,
as
right.
people.
Yeah.
I just love that. Okay, so I was going to say, what is one thing maybe? I mean, I'm sure that there are 5 things, but first thing to come to mind, and most salient to mind, that you would, I don't know, hope that people in general start to understand more about people, I guess.
What do I want people to understand? Oh, well, that's easy. First of all, human beings are walking around with a lot more grief in their body than is acknowledged, especially in this culture, which is kind of phobic of grief, and a lot more pain. And that ought to lead to empathy, more empathy and compassion than, but the social contract is to put on a shell, and then the shells are meeting the shells. And it's in the therapy world that we get under the shell. And, I just would love to wake up in a world where you assume that other people are carrying pain and grief and fear, and that it's difficult to be a person, and that would give a lot more compassion.
It'd be a lot easier to sort of get the other people around you, get them,
Right.
understand.
Yeah.
Oh, that sounds like, I mean, I know I've talked to you many times, but that sort of thing makes me feel like this nice sigh of relief, even in the midst of this interview. So that's a nice thing. Hey, you've seen me cry, so I may cry, but I'm not gonna. So for me, one of the questions is, what do you think about the concept? This may actually be really tangential, but to me, it connects in here. What do you think about the concept of mental disorders?
I don't like the phrase in general. I don't really like the idea of the categorizing. Is largely for insurance purposes, or to maybe identify different syndromes. But it's one of these strange things. When all this started in the 19th century, psychiatry was neurology and vice versa, in a sense. A brain disorder is really neurology, right? But it ended up under psychiatry, and human problems. I don't like the word mental illness or mental disorder. That being said, we know there's biological aspects of some of the syndromes. Most things are biological and psychological and genetic and emotional. It's like
And
a
social.
multifactorial windows you have to look at any given situation.
Hallelujah. Yeah, I guess there's a language, and I guess humans categorize, so that's one of the things we love to do. I had a brilliant question, but it just slipped my mind, so I'm going to say, oh yes, it had to do with, where Freud came, what he did. And I know that he looked at a couple of different, he referred to other cultures in his work. And I know Jung broadened that out further. And then you've got other people. What cultures, if any, inform your work? I know you're in Western United States culture, but are there other cultures that influence the way you do what you do?
There's an absolute, well, first of all, I happen to be reading or rereading now about the meetings between Hasidic Jewish rabbis and their flock that went on in the 1900s, the 1800s, I'm sorry, and the 1900s. And there's quite a bit of modern therapy in there. I think these guys got there first, to be honest with you.
Isn't that funny?
So the Jewish culture is definitely had a huge influence on the development of psychotherapy and psychodynamics to begin with. So it's kind of filtering in from both streams, I'm going to say. I don't know if you call this a culture, but I am interested in archetypes and what is eternal, trying to get at what's eternal. That's usually affiliated with Jung and Robert Moore. That
Kind of what's there residing in just about any culture.
It's sort of like underneath culture. There's that no matter where you go, there's human beings express themselves in. There's a warrior class and a political class and an intellectual class. The Greeks were on top of this back, right?
Keeps popping up.
Yeah. Other than that, I can't say a culture.
That's totally cool. I mean,
the American culture thing is pragmatism and behaviorism, which I don't think comes into therapy. Therapy is fairly European. Yes, it has a European sensibility, but in the American extra pieces, we like to get results. I think the European need to ponder the mysteries for a long time, but in American, you could ponder, but you like to get results too.
You gotta get some productivity in there. That reminds me, productivity is a P word, and what you said reminded me of some 3 Ps, if you recall, about how psychotherapists can sort of identify some of what their expectations are. Do you remember those? I can't forget them.
You give me a clue.
Part physician, part priest.
Oh yeah, that's from Edward Edinger, The Science and the Soul. That's how I think about being a therapist, personally. Physician, priest, and philosopher. Well, the functions of those, what do people need? In other words, people need guidance and direction and a different way of looking at life, and also sometimes to be fixed or straightened out, in that sense. So that's the physicianly part. So that is how I understand my role, is the conjunction of the physician, priest, and philosopher. Not a priest in the literal Catholic sense, but in the confession, that
wow.
People need a place to say everything and receive acceptance. See, in the religious version, you would get forgiveness with the priest as a representative of God and the church. Here, it's in a secular mode, but the needs are somewhat similar, right? To get some relief from carrying shame and guilt.
I'm not sure if the listeners know what that means, but I'll talk about it some other time.
Amen.
Amen. Yeah, that probably brings up too many questions in my head, and they're all blurring together. So I'm going to go with some form here and say, would you call yourself in any way an idealist? Or maybe an idealist, but I'm also a non-idealist. I don't know. You work for people's benefit, I guess, and to me.
That's a great question. It's a hard question. I think that a therapist has to be a therapeutic optimist, and I believe in people. That I've seen amazing change in people that persist with it and dig deep and go deep, right?
Yeah.
So I wouldn't use the word idealist, but I can say that I never give up on people. And it's, even if there's a small ray of light, we try to take it.
Hallelujah again. I guess speaking of going deep, there are a lot of course, there are lots of points of view. I mean, people can say, let's look at facts. Let's do what people call, empirically based treatments. A lot of times there are nowadays outlines you can buy and use. And you mentioned insurance and other organizations probably. But as far as going deep, and, I think there was this like spark of excitement during the original behavioristic period. Where do you think, if anywhere, behaviorism, I imagine, has a place? It's historically involved in psychotherapy. I'm not necessarily saying I'm a huge proponent. I don't really, going to strict behaviorism is kind of something that, well, I'm gonna ask you what you think about behaviorism and what you think about what it has to do with going deep or not going deep at all.
Well, I understand that cognitive behavioral therapy has gotten the big academic push, and well, it's that question is definitely touches on, you might say, pet peeves. I'm going to remain calm and say that
I'm breathing.
in 1952, I think it was, somewhere way back in the 50s, there was a guy named Eysenck that did
Hans Eysenck.
Hans Eysenck, the outcome research on, does psychotherapy work? What's the research? I was in graduate school in the late 70s, and we had to read mountains of psychotherapy research. Does psychotherapy work? And then they had analyses and the meta-analyses of research. Believe me, I had to read a lot of it. It was not fun. But the bulk of all that, and we're talking about mountains of research, showed that supported what Eysenck said, that roughly 2/3 of the people, obtained benefit, and that there was definitely a benefit of psychotherapy over not going to psychotherapy. So it's not just a parlor game or the purchase of friendship or some, wit voodoo or whatever. This was all well established by the 1970s. So the idea that just recently there's going to be evidence of this and ever, we had tons of evidence prior, and the evidence showed clearly that different kinds of therapy could help people, that the major variable was the therapeutic alliance, the relationship of the help seeker and the therapist, and characteristics of the therapist, experienced, understanding, intelligent, compassionate, etc., well-trained, etc., etc. So this idea that you can mechanize is always been floating around as to turn a soft science into a hard science. That a hard science is better, and soft science is mushy, and the hard science is, hard. and I know you're trying not to, it gets Freudian on you.
Prickles and
that somehow the world was going to get better if you had manuals, and I mean, I just think it's absurd. I think it takes everybody down the wrong street. The most important is selecting the strong people to go in on the front end of your training programs. The training should be very rigorous, much more rigorous than mine was. You have to have postgraduate training, and I think there's much more commonality among the really good therapists of all the different schools than we need a horse race between this and that. The data does not show it.
Yeah.
So this is a and then when the managed care and the short term came in, this really is a pet peeve of mine. Some therapists started to do, well, we need to do brief therapy because of insurance only covers this. And I'm like, hold on a second. I don't tell them how to write insurance policies. Why are they telling me how to do what I do? I mean, this doesn't make any sense. This makes absolutely no sense. And
yeah, there used to be a 6-session paradigm for a while.
well, there are people that come, and if they feel you could, there's a certain subset that feels complete. But this is really important. Again, research. Very important research was done. Am I going too long on this question?
No, not at all.
I'll
Yeah,
just finish my thought. The very important research was done by short-term psychodynamic therapist. Davin Low was the famous one, James Mann, and Peter Sifnios, Sifneos. This is a bunch of research I did read, and Davin Low in Montreal set up a brief therapy clinic, and they screened patients, referrals, for who would be eligible and meet the criteria for brief therapy. Naturally, they wanted to screen people in because that's their thing. They only took 1 out of 8 people.
Wow.
Which meant that 7 out of 8 required, in their view, a long-term relationship as important healing. In other words, to form an attachment, to form a connection. And you might call it, some people call it reparenting aspect of therapy, that you could not move them through and out. The damage from early attachment wounds was such that it needed a longer attachment, a couple of years maybe, with the therapist to get better, 7 out of 8. And I think that is real. I think that is real, and tons of research. The number one guy now is Shedler, Shedler. He is showing in his outcome research that a year or 2 is way better than anything shorter.
Wow.
To get results.
Wow. Yeah, after a lot of time of being out of school, not a lot of time of being out of school, but what was going on in school had a little bit to do with the brief paradigm a lot. And then coming out and listening to you more, it got me curious, and I looked in a lot of places. And it came to me that if we're vulnerable in the sense of being children for a long period of our life, 15, 20 years, this is our original foundation. How do we get there again through this kind of work? So I mean, to me, I'll just say this, you've made it feel more like a noble quest.
I feel it very strongly that way.
Yeah,
absolutely.
To see,
yeah.
It helps me answer a question I was going to ask you, and I'll ask you another one instead of this one. But it was, well, no, I don't want to go there right now. But I was going to say this helps me with the concept of a stigma and mental health care. It turns into something else. It turns into something broadly, maybe universally human. The concept of,
I would go farther than that. I believe that, with some exceptions, the people that come for therapy are healthier than the people that don't.
Yeah.
The willingness to open up, the willingness to admit that you need help, and to work on yourself is, I think, healthier than the highly defended character defenses that are common in the culture. I don't need anything. I think a wise person seeks counsel. I'm proud of the people that come and work on themselves, and impressed and admiring, and all of the above. So, and I mean it seriously. I really believe that. Now, there's certainly some highly troubled people that come to therapy, but overall, I think that the people that come to therapy are healthier than the people that don't.
Hallelujah again.
In their souls, for sure.
Pardon me?
Yeah, in the soul, at the level of the soul, for sure. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah.
Family therapists would tell you this for sure, because in the family theory stuff, you have the identified patient, right? Supposedly this teenager is a mess, right? And when the teenager comes for therapy, you find out what's going on in the family.
Yeah.
You
Yes, you
realize
do.
that this teenager has a beautiful soul. It is having projection, onto them. This is well known in the family therapy world.
Yeah, one of my professors said that he once congratulated a child for figuring out a way to get the family into therapy.
Absolutely.
Uh,
There you go. There it is. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
whatever
Absolutely.
they were, anomalous behavior they were
Yeah.
exhibiting. This may seem like an abrupt segue also, but in terms of, well, I don't know how I can actually make this into a good transition, but what feeds you, in your work, and what feeds you outside of your work?
I'll take the second one first. What feeds me outside of the work is music and poetry, and I'm in a men's group, and we support each other to go deep into every corner. What feeds me in the work is the I want to bring as much of myself in. In other words, I believe that uh, that originally therapy was very archetypally speaking magician. You're trying to figure out what's going on,
Mhm.
use the intellect to understand, that's great, but I don't think that's all of it. The lover is the bonding, and I do believe that love is the healer, not the mind. So while as a therapist, you generally don't say to people, I love you, like romantic love, or the love has to come across. And I think that feeling loved is very important. The warrior, which is action, being active and even directive, at times needs to be there. And when I work with couples, I am very warrior directive, very, very directive, all over the process.
Is that like
And
action based? Is that what you mean?
yeah, well, directive, do this, don't do that, stop talking,
Oh,
shut
oh,
up,
oh,
now we
oh.
talk. Yeah, here's what we're gonna do. You need to stop doing what you're doing.
So you're in the warrior
Yeah,
sort of
yeah, yeah,
typology,
yeah, yeah,
yeah, as a
yeah, yeah.
therapist. Okay.
And then the king holding the center, creating sacred space and put it blessing. People need blessings really badly. People need to see the good in them to be mirrored back to them. Self-psychology call it mirroring. I'm calling it blessing. It's the same thing. And generosity of spirit to communicate that to people that they are worth the time of someone they see as kind of a special person or an authority, you might say. Um, so I am in it to have all of that cooking, and the wild man as well. In other words, to make trouble, to do the unexpected, to be willing to throw in an experiment, or to have us stand up or take a walk, or you just allow creativity and intuition to come in.
I found the concept of the wild man liberating. It took a few iterations of you bringing that concept up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But we are
It,
natural creatures, I guess. We are
yeah,
natural beings.
we're dealing with infinite variety and infinite complexity. So I don't know how you could get bored. I mean, I'm not bored.
I've used well, I don't know if it's your phrase, but I got it from you a couple of times, and people perked up. Go out there and make the right kind of trouble.
Absolutely.
I love
Yeah.
that. I'm
Oh
glad
yeah.
I got this in a video.
Oh yeah.
At least 15 people are going to see this, or 400. You never know. It's true. And what came up with some of what you were saying is that I have not asked a little bit about some of the things that you really dedicated yourself to. I'm sure that there are various ways that I could mean dedicated yourself to, but a couple of things are bioenergetic and why men's work. So there's bioenergetics. I'm interested in how come that became a big part of your life? And then also men's work. How come that became a decent sized part of your life? I know you do probably everything, couples, teens, and all that. But I'm curious about.
I don't work with a lot of young kids hardly ever, even though I love them to pieces, but
Yeah.
I don't really know what I'm doing. So I don't. Bioenergetics. Well, that's another one of those bizarre. It's kind of a long personal story, but when I
and
was
you know
in
what?
my
I may ask you to define it first in brief
yes, okay,
because
fine. Bioenergetics is a form of therapy or therapeutics that came through Wilhelm Reich, who was in Freud's inner circle, was interested in the body and energy and blocks to the flow of energy and feeling in the body, and how do you open up more feeling, more sexuality, more aliveness. His patient and disciple was Al Lowen. Al Lowen founded Bioenergetics. The short version is it's psychotherapy with crying, screaming, hitting, breathing,
moving.
movement, and self-expression. Uh, and it all goes back to an observation made by Freud also, but primarily Wilhelm Reich, that every repression is both psychological and physical. So if, let's say you have a kid who is being mistreated, is starting to cry, and the mean dad says, I'll give you something to cry about. The crying and the sadness is repressed, but so is the impulse is squeezed in, so you're going to
Yeah.
get tight,
Yeah. Yeah.
and that tension is still there, right?
Yeah.
So it's challenging to only talk about, you know, yeah, my dad was a bad dad, but it was nothing. So when you start to open up the body, the memories start coming back, and it's dramatic, and it's emotional. It's
Yeah.
emotional.
And I'm
So
hearing, yeah, go ahead, please. I'm sorry.
I needed it because I was really like a brain walking around on a stalk. I mean, I was not in touch with feelings or body or anything. And I fluked into it when I was in my early 20s. But it's a crazy story. I don't think it'll fit. We don't need it here. But I did about 8 sessions, 10 sessions then in my underwear.
Wow.
And it was an incredible experience, but kind of frightening. So I more or less sort of blocked it out.
Wow.
And when you go to standard psychology training, there's no touching people. I mean, you would never touch anybody.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, it's just that stuff was considered way the hell out there. And then I found out that there was a bioenergetic training program in Alachua, which is 20 miles from here. I was stunned, but as soon as I heard it, which I overheard it at a party, I knew I had to do it. I knew it was my fate. Therapists need, in my judgment, postgraduate training of some kind anyway,
Yeah.
whether it's whatever you pick, object relations, psychodynamic. So I knew I needed more training. There's no way that regular graduate school is going to do it for you. That's out. So I decided to take the plunge, and it was a plunge, believe me. I mean, it was very emotional and way overwhelming at the time. And I went into bioenergetic therapy as well with Bob Glazer, which involved quite a bit of manual work. In other words, he would drill his thumbs and fingers into your muscles.
Yeah.
And I was screaming my head off and hitting and screaming and breathing and kicking. And I started to feel more alive, and I learned to cry, and my sexuality got better, and I got a lot of anger out, and it was great. So I came through the therapy, came through the training, became a trainer in the bioenergetics. And it's not for everybody, but it's more, it's
Yeah.
people are all blocked up, and you cannot feel. And the understandings that I receive, even if I don't do formal bioenergetics, the understandings are really, really, it's almost like having a huge extra edge that most therapists don't have. They
Yeah,
don't.
absolutely.
I
One of these
mean,
days I might get it together to do that. You're seeing, I mean, you know, I mean, I've
yeah.
been, I can already tell people that I've been to several retreats where Eric definitely has bioenergetics as a primary thing available to everyone there. And it's been amazing what I've seen. I mean, people who, I've heard them say, ouch. And the next thing you know, their face is relaxed,
You
they're
see some,
breathing.
you see miracles happen, especially when you have
Truly,
the
truly.
group, the power of the group. The combination is awesome. The bioenergetics and the power of the group love, the group support, or the group challenge, and the group energy really, really helps a lot.
And although I feel like I want to find a way to sew this up, I can't help but ask. I have like 3 brilliant questions to sew it up after this question, maybe. Um,
Take your time.
Brilliant. And why men? I mean, I think to some people that might be an obvious question, even to you, but I think there's a reason that you have some men's groups going on.
Well, first of all, I want to say that I work with women a
Yeah,
lot.
yeah. I'm
And,
sorry. Yeah,
oh, no, no,
that's
no.
not. Yeah,
And
yeah.
well, that there is has been some confusion out there, and sometimes I get a call. Do you work with women?
Oh,
No.
yeah, yeah.
As a therapist, it's fit. It used to be over time, more and more men that come to therapy. Probably when I started, it was 70-30 women to men. Now, for me, it's probably 40% women, 60% men, something like that. In the therapy thing. As far as well, I can say very straightforwardly, I went into the men's movement. I stumbled into the men's movement in America to find out I didn't feel like a man. And I found out that men need initiation and need uh, the input and the company and the energy of other men to become a man. A woman cannot turn a male into a man. So I went into it for myself. um, I did not anticipate becoming a leader in the men's movement, but one of the things I learned is that that's kind of that's a natural progression in it. The world needs men to step up into leadership, and I didn't start as a leader. I mean, I was intimidated to even speak in groups of men, much less be a leader. Um, Over time, slowly but surely, experimented with the leadership role, and well, I like it, and I think I'm clear in my mission. My mission is to create a world of soulful and alive people by developing and offering powerful learning and growth experiences.
Aho, which means
That's
amen,
what I,
which means hallelujah, which
yeah,
means none of that really, probably.
yeah.
But
That's that's what uh, and well, men are kind of pack animals. I mean, I think we're comfortable in groups, but the big leap in terms of what we do is that most gatherings of men, and there's all kinds of gatherings of men, from the fire department to the poker game to the softball to the elks to the moose. I mean, the men being in groups and packs is nothing new. What is the extra edge and the new part is setting up a norm that all parts of men are accepted and valued in these circles. That's a huge difference, because in all of those other circles, generally, no one's going to see who needs to cry
yeah,
or
right,
what's
right,
going on under the
right.
surface. There's more of a group collusive agreement to not go under the surface,
Yeah, yeah, to
right?
stay surface. Yeah,
Yeah, which is fine for a poker game and softball and all that, but this stands it on its head and say every part of you is welcome. Your guilt, your shame, your evil deeds, your whatever you're feeling, all of you is welcome. That opens up the jets for guys to
yeah,
express
yeah,
what there's really very not much other place to express it.
yeah.
It just isn't. I mean, it's that's reality.
So much comes up for me that when you say that I don't have words for. I thought of the word love while
Yeah.
you were talking. We
Oh,
need
it's a
love
good,
and many
yeah.
manifestations of love. I have availed myself to various things that Eric's provides, and again, I just
You're a big part.
we
You're a major part of it, Jim.
we get a chance to become human, us men, and I would say women too. And I did want to clarify that I'm totally aware that you work with
No, I know that.
general
I'm
pop,
saying it for the our listening
the
audience.
listeners, yeah. By the way, when all this is said and done, do you mind if I put some information about you in the description below the video, maybe even contact info? I know you're
It's fun.
often in high demand, so you may not need that, but
Yeah, no, this is not an advertisement. This is not a
no,
marketing tool. This is a discussion. I don't need
no,
it.
for me, it's for the benefit of the people living,
Yeah.
or, living around here that could make use of you, even though, well, we'll see. But anyway, the final three genius questions I have are, what kind of a thing would you have to say for people who are considering seeking help from, either a mental health professional or a shaman or whatever? What kind of thing might you want to say to them?
I know you have hopes and I know you have fears. That makes you normal. It's a really important relationship. Feel free to ask around and to sort of interview your potential helper. And if it doesn't feel right for you, keep looking, because once you're in, you're in. It's a big commitment. So um, the I think it's a wise choice for virtually everybody to explore themselves. I believe we can all afford to get to know ourselves better.
Yeah.
And we need to let go of the idea that you can figure everything out by yourself. Nobody can. So you're not failing by reaching out, you're acknowledging reality. That's reality.
Yeah. I laugh because how much I used to feel
Oh, yeah,
like
me
it
too.
was a sign of failure, but it
Oh, yeah.
really is
Oh, yeah.
part of our call to
Oh, totally.
coexist as humans. I love it.
Oh, yeah. Even I delayed a year going to therapy that I needed to go to. And I was in graduate school to be a therapist. And then when I finally went, I felt like, what a schmuck. I wasted a whole, I should have gone the year before. Yeah, but
Right.
it was, some kind of fear and pride and
Yeah.
self-sufficiency is a powerful thing. I mean,
Oh yeah. Okay.
but self-sufficient doesn't work when you need help and you don't get it. That's
Yeah.
not self-sufficient, that's self-defeating. So we
Oh,
can't do
okay.
anything for that. We don't really do it for anybody anyway. So when people come in and they seem to be like, I don't want to depend, and I say, listen, let me reassure you, I'm not going to be there 99.9% of the time when you have to face your difficulties. So if you're worried about being on your own to deal with life, you will be. Don't worry about it.
You
But
have plenty of
meanwhile,
that.
you'll stop in here and get some new ideas, because no one can think of everything by themselves. That
Second
usually,
brilliant
that
question.
usually seals the deal right there.
Well, okay, I'm going to use that one maybe if I remember.
Use anything.
No, I've been
Yeah, use
letting
everything.
go of
We
control
need everything.
because, yeah,
Everything and more, throw it in, throw it in the hopper.
take every tool and shove it in there. Second brilliant question, if I say so myself. What do you have to say to people who might be avoiding therapy or thinking that maybe the best thing is for someone they love to go into therapy, which may or may not be related, but people avoiding, the concept. They might have it in their head, but maybe they're avoiding it. Maybe they don't think it's for them.
Well, that goes under the old school term of resistance analysis. We have to help people clarify misconceptions and clarify projections. I think the fear is not usually of therapy or the therapist. The fear of what they have inside that would come to the surface. I think that's the number one. But we try to elicit the fears, which can be quite irrational. If they are, you can generally clear it up, right? Um, Otherwise, empathizing with like, wow, you got a lot of pain inside you and you're kind of scared that if it all came up at once, you might disintegrate or fall apart or freak out or break down. And, you know, I think we can modulate it. I think we can, right? And kind of a reassurance. It's like, listen, I'm not going to blow the lid off here. We got time to get to know each other, take it a little piece at a time. That usually helps relieve that particular fear.
Hallelujah. By the way, every time I say yeah, hallelujah, aho, it doesn't mean that I already resonate with it and I already knew that. Sometimes, a lot of times it means, yeah, wow, that phrasing is hitting me pretty hard, you know, like I feel like I'm learning some things as I talk to you. Final genius question would be, people considering entering something like the psychotherapeutic professions or something similar to that, what kind of thing might you have to say to them?
Well, the field has become 80+% female. I don't know what's going on with the men, not less representation of men. That's gonna be, you need both in droves, and you need male role models for the younger men. But that doesn't address your question. What do I have to say to people coming in? First
Or
of all,
considering?
I believe that therapy for training therapists is mandatory, should be mandatory, and a few different kinds too. I was amazed that it wasn't mandatory in clinical psychology training.
Me too.
I
Me
mean,
too.
how you have to be on the other side of the couch. I mean, you just have to. I don't know how else, and to learn about yourself, all the above. I mean, that's definite. Number two, and this is a huge concern. I'm worried about the training right now. There's a theories of persons, and then there's techniques. Cognitive behavioral therapy is a technique, not a theory of persons, and we are in the people field. It's infinite. I mean, you can learn a lot about people from literature, from theater, from plays, from poetry, from, you know, but in order to understand people, the minimum is psychodynamics plus some kind of self-psychology plus I think some bioenergetics. Character theory is not being taught. Uh, Generally, a person's problems are character plus stress plus situation, and then there's manifestations of the distress. But character means that there's different kind of people. There's high achievers, there's flighty people, there's mechanical people, there's uptight people. And the kind of person is extremely important, you know. And this isn't even being taught. So I'm really worried that the training is not broad enough on the theory of persons, theories, I should say, of persons. So no matter what graduate school you go to, you are going to have to do postgraduate training if you want to be a real therapist. Now, I know I'm going on too long with this question and I'm probably chewing up the clock, but I do want to say that as a therapist, I have counseling people, I have short-term psychotherapy people, I have intensive psychotherapy people. They're all valid. Counseling is totally valid. Focuses on present day, problem solving, practical. Not everybody's in for the deep dive within, and that's it. You have to sort of know who fits what, right? Some people, psychotherapy could be very meaningful. It's not necessarily involving dream analysis or the psychoanalytic type things. So, you know, and then there's miscellaneous as a whole nother. I mean, some people are there to get an emotional support animal form signed,
Yeah.
or various kinds of miscellanea that fit in the, and I'd say the mentoring of young men is a special thing that is not typical psychotherapy at all. I mean, it's kind of man-to-man transmission of masculinity.
Mm.
So all of those are valid, but counseling, there's nothing wrong with counseling or counselors or counseling psychology, but it's not psychotherapy, it's counseling. So you need training in psychotherapy if you're going to do psychotherapy, meaning intensive, hold the space for the journey within.
I think you mentioning that distinction a while back was something I haven't, used. And it's not only I haven't used it, I don't remember hearing the distinction quite often in my training and my history. I go back and forth in general from using all kinds of distinctive terms as synonyms, whether it's in the field or outside of the field, and then sometimes finding it very helpful to make those kind of distinctions. I guess I'm going to sign off right now saying this is Dr. Jim Porter being schooled once again by Dr. Eric Diamond. By the way, Dr. Diamond, what an amazing name for either a superhero or a supervillain. I just think I never thought of it until this afternoon while I was talking to my wife about this interview. I'm so glad you're willing to do this with me. This just, yeah, it does something for me. It gets me in a place where I talk to somebody about something that's important to me. And I really think that you probably know this, but there's some things that you've said out loud that I think a lot of people have been thinking or feeling in their hearts. And so I think, I'm hoping, I know this will be valuable to lots of people. I appreciate it, Eric. I'm going to sign off from the official recording, and